Welcome to Module 13. I'm your professor, Dr. English Dowdell. So in this lecture, we're going to tackle a big idea in programming, object-oriented concepts. Things like classes, objects, attributes, and methods. Now I'm going to be honest. When I first learned about these years ago, the topic, it didn't click for me right away. So if your brain starts to go, wait, what? That's completely normal. My goal today is to walk you through it slowly with lots of everyday examples. So at the end, you can say, I know what a class is. I know what an object is. I can tell the difference between an attribute and a method. And I can model a simple class in pseudocode. So that's exactly what our module learning objectives are: to describe objects and classes, to identify attributes and methods, and to model a simple class with pseudocode. Now we're going to connect this directly to the work that you're going to do for this module. You've got a discussion post where you're going to be describing yourself as a class, and then the assignment where you're building a product class for a simple online store. So therefore, everything we discuss in this lecture will directly inform what you'll be submitting. Okay, so let's start simple. Okay, look around you for a second. Think about your phone, your car or bus if you ride a bus, your favorite coffee mug, even yourself. All of these are things, or in programming language, you can think of them as objects. Now, each of these things has a characteristic, what it is, what it is like, okay? And then it has a behavior, what it can do or what can be done to it. So, for example, if you think about your phone, okay, some of the characteristics, and these are like attributes, okay, would be your brand, okay, so it could be like an Apple or a Samsung. What the model is, the model, okay, that's a characteristic. The color could be a black phone, that's a characteristic. Your storage capacity, 256 gigabyte. Your battery level, these are all characteristics of a phone. These are like attributes. And then you have what you call behaviors. These are like methods, okay? Your phone can make a call. It can send text. It can take photo. It can install an app. It can increase volume. Now, we don't usually use the words attribute and methods in everyday life, but we do naturally think in terms of things that have data and can do actions. Now, object-oriented program is basically saying, let's organize our code around things, which are objects, that have data and behaviors. Okay, so let's formalize that a bit. So in programming, an object is a bundle that holds both data, remember that's attributes, and behaviors, those are methods, that belong together. Okay, so if you think of a student object, a bank account object, a product object, a course object, each one has attributes, facts about that object. Okay, and they have methods, actions that the object can perform or have done to it. So let's take a student object as an example. Okay, your attributes might be what? Name, student ID, major, GPA, email. These are all attributes, okay, of a student object. And then methods might include enroll in course, drop a course, update email, calculate GPA. Now, you'll notice something. The attribute describes the state of the student, who they are, what they're studying, and so on. The method describes the things they do: enrolling, dropping, updating, calculating. So when you hear object, I want you to think a specific thing in the program that stores data and knows how to do certain actions. Okay, so if an object is a thing, what is a class? So a class is the blueprint or template for the object. Okay, so let's use a real world analogy. Okay, imagine a house blueprint. Okay, the house blueprint itself is not a house. Okay, but what it does is it describes how the houses are built from it and what those houses are going to look like. Okay, so it'll describe like how many bedrooms. It'll show like where the kitchen goes. It'll show like how big the living room is. So from that one blueprint, we can build house one, which would be like maybe 123 Main Street. We could build house two, which is like 456 Oak Avenue. We could build house three, which is like, 789 Pine Lane. Okay. Now, all of those are objects. These are all actual houses, but they're built from the same class or blueprint. Now, in programming, the class describes what attributes each object will have and what methods each object can perform. So an object is a specific instance of that class. So let's connect this to a student class. Okay, so the student class describes, and these are the attributes, the name, the student ID, the major, and the GPA. And then the methods are to enroll in a course, to drop a course, and then to update email. But the actual objects might be student one, Alex is the name. The ID is 12345. The major is IT, and the GPA is 3.4. Okay. And then another object made from that same class is our student two, which the name is Jordan. The student ID is 23456. The major is cybersecurity, and the GPA is 3.9. So same blueprint, but different actual filled in values. So the key idea here is that a class equals the definition or the blueprint, okay? And then the object is the actual thing that's built from that blueprint. Okay, so let's zero in on the two big words that you'll be using all week, attributes and methods. Okay, you'll use these in your discussion, okay, where you're going to be describing yourself as a class, and then you'll use this in your assignment where you'll be defining a product class. Okay, so attributes, what are attributes? Okay, so attributes, again, like I said, this is the data or the characteristics that belong to an object. So for the person class, that would be first name, which is going to be text, last name, which is also going to be text, age, which might be an integer, height in inches, which it also might be an integer, an email, which is going to be text, and then is student, which is a Boolean of either true or false. Now for a car, the attributes might be the make of the car, okay, the model of the car, the year of the car, the color of the car, the mileage of the car. Now I want you to notice a few things that each attribute has a name, like make, age, year, things like that. Price, maybe, if it's for a store. Each attribute also has a type. Okay, so text, integer, decimal, Boolean, so on and so forth. Okay, now I want you to keep in mind attributes are not actions, they are facts about the object. So if you're ever unsure, say whether something is an attribute, ask yourself, Is this a description or a fact about the object? If yes, then it's probably an attribute. Now, methods, on the other hand, these are the actions that the object can perform or can be performed on it. So, for instance, methods for a person might be to update the email, okay, to celebrate the birthday, to introduce self, okay. Methods for the car might be start engine, stop engine, accelerate, and brake. Now, when you write methods, they usually kind of look like this, method name and then the parameters. Okay, so for example, the update email has the parameter of the new email. So therefore, you'll know what the new email is to feed that into that method. Accelerate has the amount so that you know how fast you're going to accelerate that particular car. Okay. Now, if you're unsure whether something is a method, you're going to ask yourself, is this something the object can do or something that can be done to it? And if yes, then it's probably a method. Okay, so let's connect this to your discussion post for the week because it uses a really kind of fun prompt. Okay, if you were an object, what attributes and behaviors would you have? So you need to describe yourself as a class. So let's literally pretend that you're a class, okay? And so, for instance, I'm going to do me, okay? I'm a class. I'm going to call my class Dr. D, okay, as an example, okay? So I have attributes of a name, my favorite drink, my teaching specialty, my number of courses teaching, and is coffee required, okay? My methods are start class session, grade assignments, record lecture video, answer student email. Okay, now notice how attributes are data about me. Okay, and methods are things that I do in a typical week. Okay, now for yourself, you might have something like this. Okay, you might call your class gamer student. Okay, so your attributes would be name, major, favorite game, hours of sleep per night, caffeine level. Okay, your methods might be study, play game, attend class, submit assignment. Now, in your discussion post, you'll do something similar. Okay, I want you to give your class a name. Okay, it can be something fun like, class night owl or class supermom or class future developer. Okay, then I want you to list your attributes. Remember, these are things that describe you. Okay, and then I want you to list your methods. These are things you do regularly. Okay, now, this is a fun warm up that kind of gets your brain in the habit of separating what something is, which is an attribute, versus what something does, which is a method. Okay, now I've given you an example here. I don't want to see these examples on your assignment. I want you to come up with your own set of attributes, your own set of methods, okay? Things that you do regularly and things that describe you. Okay, now let's move on from the idea level down to pseudocode. Okay, because one of the outcomes for this module is to model a simple class with pseudocode. Now remember, we're not writing real code in a specific language yet. We're just using a structured way to describe a class so that it's clear. Now, a simple pseudocode structure for a class might look something like this. The keyword class, and then whatever the class name is, the attributes, then you'll list the different attributes, colon, and then like what type it is, like what data type it is. And then you'll have your method, and then you'll say, you'll use the word methods, and then you'll have whatever the method name is. And if there's a parameter that is needed for that method, then you'll have the parameter and then what data type that parameter is. And then underneath there, you'll describe what it does, what this method does. Okay, and so you'll just keep listing those for the different methods. So this is the structured way that we describe a class when in pseudocode. So let's do an example of this. Let me show you an example of this. Okay, so imagine that we're designing a simple bank account class. Okay, so the first step, like what we've talked about, is to actually list out the different attributes. This is data about the account, about the bank account. So that would be things like account number, account holder name, the balance, is the account active, is active. And then the next step would be to list out the different methods. Remember, these are actions on the account that the account can take, and so or be taken up on the account. So these would be like deposit, okay, and that would maybe take a parameter, of an amount, so we know how much we're actually depositing. Withdraw, again, amount would be a parameter for that, so that we know how much we're actually withdrawing. And then display balance, okay. So in pseudocode, it would be written something like this. So we'd have the keyword class. We have whatever the class name is. We start with the word attributes, and then we'd list each one of the attributes, the attribute name and the data type. Okay. And then we say methods, and then we list what the method name is. And if there's some kind of parameter that needs to be, like we said, we need to know how much they're depositing. So amount would be a parameter, and it would be a decimal data type. And then underneath it, we would put what the description is. So this would add amount to the balance. Okay, withdraw would be another method, okay, with the parameter of amount, decimal data type, and the description is subtracts amount if sufficient funds exist. And then the third method that we described was display balance, okay, no parameters needed for that, okay, and it displays the current balance, okay. Now, notice we're not writing every line of code inside of the method. At this level, we just want the name of the method, listing any parameters. And of course, you could have more than one parameter, okay? And then giving a short description of what it does. And this is exactly what you're going to be doing for your product class assignment, okay? Something like this. Now, let's connect all of this directly to your Module 13 assignment, because this whole lecture is really building up to that. Okay, so the assignment is to define attributes and methods for a product class. So you're imagining that you're building a simple online store, okay, and you need a class to represent products, okay? So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to define your attributes for a product class. You're going to define the methods for the product class. You're going to explain briefly what each method does, and then you're going to submit this as a labeled document, you know, um, um, a doc file, a PDF, or whatever the case is. So let's walk through this step by step. But first, before I do that, I want to just specify that you must include at least 5 attributes, okay, at least 3 methods, and then again, like I said, a short explanation for each method. Okay, so let's look at the first step. Let's break it down. Okay, so the first step is to define the class attributes. Okay, so you're asked to list at least 5 attributes for the product class. So the assignment gives you some good examples, product name, price, quantity in stock, category, description, SKU number. You'll write your attributes like that. You'll say, what the attribute is, like what we showed in the previous slide, and then you'll have like whatever the name of the attribute is, a colon, and then whatever the data type is. Okay. So if it's name, like I said, colon text, okay, price, colon decimal, so on and so forth. Now, a few tips is you want to use meaningful names, okay? Price is going to be better than just using the letter P, okay? But don't use spaces. We're not doing spaces, okay? One of the things that is encouraged is using like the camel case, okay, where if you're since you're blending in the word, like if you have multiple words and you have to like put them together, either you can uppercase like maybe the like for instance, we had quantity and stock. Okay, maybe that was an attribute. So you would maybe make the word in um, the I and N uppercase, the S and stock uppercase, or you could use like underscores in between them. Okay, don't use dashes or anything like that. Use like the underscores, but don't use spaces. Okay, but like I said, use meaningful words. Again, rather than X and Y or P for price, use the actual word price. You also want to use realistic data types. So text would be for names, descriptions, categories. Integer would be for counts, like quantities, okay? Decimals would be for money, like for price, okay? Boolean would be for things like true or false, or yes or no, or something like that. Like, for instance, is on sale. Okay, notice how it kind of uses that camel case here. So, is on sale would either be true that it is on sale or false that it's not on sale. Now, you can absolutely add more attributes if you want. Again, description, weight in pounds, whatever the case is, you can definitely do those. But just keep in mind, attributes equal the information about the product. Now, step two is going to be to define the class methods. So you're going to define at least 3 methods for the product class. Okay. Again, the assignment gives you some examples. Okay. And you can look at those examples and then maybe even come up with your own. Um, you'll write them like I said, you'll have the method name, and then in parentheses next to it, you'll have whatever the parameter is, colon, and then whatever the type is. Okay. And then underneath that, you'll write a short, maybe 1 sentence description of what that method does. Okay. So you'll do that for each of your methods. So again, make sure that your method has a name, any parameters that it needs. And if it doesn't need any parameters, then have an empty parentheses, okay, if there's no parameters. And then a brief sentence explaining what it does, okay? And that's it. You don't have to write full code, just a clear design of your class. Now, here's what a complete answer might look like in structure. Now, don't copy this word for word, but you can use this as a guide. So, you'll have your name, you'll have, whatever the title of the assignment is, and then your class name, which would be product. Okay. Then you'll list the different attributes. And like I say, you'll have the name of the attribute and then whatever the data type it is. Okay. And again, no spaces. No spaces. We don't use spaces in programming. Okay. If you need to separate the words, like I said, either use the camel case or use the underscores. Okay. But be consistent. So if you start to use camel case, then use camel case for all of it. Okay. If you're using underscores, then use underscores for all of your attribute names. Okay. And then you're going to, like I said, list out your methods. Okay. And so your methods are usually like this kind of camel case. Okay. Because they're usually more than one word. Okay, so update stock, and then we would have the parameter in parentheses and then a short description of what this method does. So I did this for all 3. So this is a good example. Again, this is just a pattern, okay? I want you to customize your own attributes and methods as long as they're reasonable for a product in an online store, okay? So again, they have to apply to an online store, okay? So I want to tie this back to something you've actually seen online. And like I said, I may be kind of overkilling this, but like I said, this was a concept that was really difficult for me to grasp in the beginning. Okay, so I want you to think about going on Amazon or Walmart or Wayfair or some kind of online store and looking at a product page. Okay, now for any given product, you're going to see what? A name, you're going to see a price, you'll see a description, maybe a category, maybe a SKU, maybe some kind of stock information. Okay. So that would be our class, and then this is the object that we would create with that class. So we'd have a name of the product, we'd have what the price is, we'd have whatever the quantities are in stock, we'd have whatever categories it falls under, we'd have the description, and then we'd have like the SKU number. Okay, now imagine our website needs to say decrease the stock when you buy one. Okay, so that's using the update stock method. Okay, the website needs to apply a sale price on Black Friday. Okay, so that's going to use the apply discount method. Okay, and then your website needs to show the product details when you click it. Okay, and that's going to be using the display product details method. So you see how these are kind of tied in. Okay, so again, look at Amazon, look at Walmart, look at one of these online stores, and think about for any given product, what are the names, the attributes, the ways that we would describe that product. Okay, and then what are the methods? What are the things that we can either do to that product, okay, or have that product do, okay? So that's exactly what you're modeling with your product class. Again, you're not building a whole website. You're just designing the blueprint for one piece of it, which is the product. Okay, now before we wrap it up, I want to give you one more example. Like I said, I really want you guys to understand this concept. So let's look at a course class, okay, to reinforce again the attributes and the methods. So think about this class you're in now. Okay, so for attributes, you've got a course name, you've got a course code, you've got an instructor name, okay, you've got the number of credits, okay, you've got the current module, okay. And then as far as methods, you've got an open, you can open a module, okay, within the course, okay, and for parameters, you're feeding in that module number, okay. I can record attendance with that course, okay. I can post announcements with that course, and I can calculate final grades in that course, okay. So these are my methods, and these are my attributes. So in pseudocode, okay, this is how it would be written in pseudocode. Okay, so again, your attributes are listed out very similar to what we did there. And then our methods, again, we list the name of the method, whatever the parameter is, and then a short description of that method. Okay, now, again, it's going to use the same pattern. Think about attributes are facts about the course. Okay, methods are actions that the course can perform or that can be performed on it. Okay, I think the more examples that you see, and that's the reason why I'm showing you a lot of them, I think it's easier to kind of identify which is which, between attributes and methods. Okay, so now let's take a moment. Let's summarize what we've covered today because we hit several big ideas. Okay, so one, we talked about object, and these are things in your program. Okay, they bundle together data and behavior. Okay, then there's classes. Remember, these are the blueprints for the object. You define attributes and methods in the class, and then you create the objects from it. Okay, we talked about attributes. Attributes are what? The characteristics or the data describing the object. So examples would be what? Name, price, quantity in stock, category, SKU. Okay. Our methods, remember, are the actions that the object can perform or can be done to it. Okay, so examples would be update stock, apply discount, display product data. Okay, and then the pseudo classes we talked about, you can model a class by showing the class name, the attributes listed with their data types, okay, and then the methods listed with parameters and a brief description, okay. Now, if you walk away remembering that class is equal to blueprint, object is equal to the actual thing, attribute is equal to data, method is equal to actions, then you're really in good shape for this module. Okay, so your next steps for this week, you're going to read chapter 14 in the textbook, which reinforces some of what we talked about. Okay, you've got a discussion that you're going to describe yourself as a class. You're going to describe your attributes and you're going to describe your methods. So start brainstorming like if I were an object, okay, and that would be sort of like, the way you would think about it. Okay, what would be my attributes? What would it be the things I could describe about myself? What are the things, my methods? What are the things I do or can be done to me? Okay. And then you've got an assignment where you're going to design a product class for an online store, again, listing at least 5 attributes and 3 methods, and a short explanation of what each method does. Now, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me. But you're absolutely capable of learning this, okay? We've taken it step by step, so if you need to refresh this and look back on it, you can look at some of my examples. Now, I'll end with this. Um, if you still feel fuzzy, if this still feels fuzzy to you, that's okay. Okay. This topic often starts to make a little bit more sense when you say do the discussion, when you describe yourself as a class, or once you do the product class assignment. Okay. Once you see a few more examples, say in the chapter, and even in if you review like the lecture, okay, it'll start making a little bit more sense to you. Now, don't worry about writing full code in a specific language yet. Okay, right now, the goal is just to be able to say, I can describe a thing in terms of attributes and methods, and I can write pseudocode for a simple class. Okay, that's exactly what we're aiming for with this module. Now, if you run into trouble while working with your product class, again, ask yourself, what does the product have? Okay, that's the attribute. How can I describe the product? That's your attributes. What does this product do or what can be done to it? Those are your methods. Okay, once you answer those 2 questions, then you're most of the way there. Okay. All right, that's it for Module 13's lecture on object-oriented concepts. Have a great week.